Having looked at string interpolation, methods, and briefly touched the concept of directives, let's practice what we've learned so far by doing a bit of exercises. I have 3 exercises for you. First, I want you to store the name of a movie and its release year in 2 data properties and output the values using string interpolation. You can use any data values that you want. For the second exercise, I want you to output whether or not the movie is old. The movie is old if it was released in the past century, i.e. before year 2000. To do this, you should use a method to determine whether or not the movie is old and output the result accordingly. For the last exercise, I want you to bind the title attribute of the div element to the data property that contains the name of the movie, such that when you hover your mouse over the div, the title will be displayed. So if you're up for it, go ahead and pause this video now and give it a shot yourself. I'll be back with my solution in just a moment. Alright, I hope you managed to do it. Let's walk through the solution together. Beginning with the first exercise, let's begin by adding the 2 data properties that we need. I'll name them movie title and release year. I'll use the matrix as an example that was released in year 1999. Alright, so far so good. With this, we can simply output the values with the string interpolation syntax as we've seen before. So I'll use the double curly bracket syntax and I'll enter movie title, which is the name of my data property. And I'll do the same for the release year. Actually, I'll just remove the D right here. Let's run the code and verify that everything looks good. With that, let's move on to exercise number 2. For this exercise, there are a few ways to solve it, and I will show you a few of them. My first approach is to implement a method that returns the string that I want to output, which is the simplest approach. I'll first add the methods objects in which I'll add the new method. So I'll go down here, I'll write methods, colon, and an empty object. And I will name the method isMovieOld, like this. So I'll add a property of that name and a function as its value. This method should return the string old if the release year is less than 2000 and new otherwise. I will return an expression consisting of a shorthand if statement, but you can write this more explicitly if you prefer. So I'll say this.release year less than 2000. Then I'll return old and otherwise new. Remember that within methods, we need to use the this keyword to access data properties or other methods, because vue.js proxies this for us to be available within this context, which is the this context. With the method in place, let's turn our attention to the template. With this approach, all we need to do is to invoke the method from within string interpolation syntax, such that the return value of the method is output. So I'll go up here, replace this with some string interpolation, and I'll simply write isMovieOld and parenthesis, which is the name of our method. And let's just see that it works. Now, of course, we could pass in the release year as an argument to the method to make it slightly more generic. So let's go ahead and do that. By adding a parameter with the name of release year to the function, I also have to remove the this keyword to make use of it correctly. Like so. Within the template, I can simply write the name of the data property that I want to pass as an argument within the parentheses. So up here, I'll just write release year, which matches the data property name. Run the code and everything still works. But let's make this just a little bit cleaner by only having the method tell us whether or not the movie is old and not what to output. Returning a Boolean value will give us what we want, i.e. true if the movie is old and false otherwise. I can do this by simply deleting the shorthand if statement and only return the expression which evaluates to a Boolean value. Like so. Then, within the template, I will invoke this method within the string interpolation syntax as before, but this time with a shorthand if statement that uses the return value of the method. So let's change this. I'll add the shorthand if statement here. And if the movie is old, I'll output old. Otherwise, I'll output new, exactly as we did within the method before. So I'll run the code and it still works. So those were a few approaches to solving exercise number 2. So let's solve the last exercise now. As you saw in the previous video on directives, we can bind a data property to an HTML element's attribute in the DOM by using the vue.bind directive. First, we type out the name of the directive, vbind in this case. So let's enter it here, vbind, like so. Then we add a colon and pass in an argument. In the case of the vbind directive, we pass in the name of the HTML attribute that we would like to bind to. Since we want to bind to the title attribute, I will enter title here. Last but not least, I will append an equal sign, followed by the name of the data property that we want to bind within quotation marks. So in this case, it's movie title. That's it. Hovering the mouse over the div element will reveal the movie's title after just a moment. And with that, we have solved all of the exercises for this lecture. So let's move on to learning some more directives.